April 1865. The script for the American Civil War was entering its final, bloody act. For 9 months, the siege of Petersburg had devolved into a hellish stalemate, a war of attrition that was bleeding both sides dry. In the north, General Ulysses S. Grant, a man of iron will, was waiting. He was reading the script, waiting for the one fatal error. In the south, General Robert E. Lee's legendary army was now a ghost, starving, exhausted, and running out of ammunition. On April 1st, Grant's plan was set in motion. At a critical crossroads called Five Forks, his cavalry, under General Sheridan, struck Lee's flank with brutal precision, and the line, which had held for 9 agonizing months, shattered in a single blow. For Lee, the options were gone. The Confederate capital, Richmond, would fall. There was only one hope left: escape west, to link up with General Johnston's army in North Carolina. But General Grant had already read that page of the script. The trap was set, and the most relentless pursuit in American history had just begun. The race was on. Lee marched west, but Grant did not simply follow. He anticipated. He sent his cavalry and infantry on a parallel, faster route, aiming to cut the head of the snake. But Grant wasn't just chasing an army. He was chasing a ghost. Lee's men hadn't been properly fed in days. They were marching on willpower alone, some reduced to eating tree bark. Lee knew his only chance was a rendezvous. He had ordered massive supply trains to meet his army at a small station, Amelia Court House. This food was their only hope. Grant knew it too. The moment Petersburg fell, he had ordered his cavalry to strike every railroad, every supply line. He was attacking the army by killing its stomach. On April 4th, Lee's starving army limped into Amelia Court House, their eyes fixed on the trains that held their salvation. But the script had a cruel twist. The trains were there, but they were empty. A logistical error of historic proportions. There was no food. Lee was forced to halt his entire army for 24 precious hours, sending his men into the countryside to beg or steal whatever food they could find. It was a fatal delay, and Grant did not wait. While Lee was stopped, Grant's army swept past him to the south, cutting off the first escape route. The walls of the trap were closing in. Lee's gamble on Amelia had failed. The road south was blocked. The script had changed. There was only one path left: west. He would make a desperate run for the next supply depot at Farmville. But his army was no longer a cohesive force. It had stretched into a desperate, 10-mile-long column of starving men, slowed by their own vital, lumbering wagon train. Grant's relentless cavalry saw the opening. On April 6th, at a place called Sailor's Creek, they struck the column, not at the front, but in its vulnerable, lagging center. The result was not a battle. It was a catastrophe. The Confederate line was cut in two. Lee's entire rear guard, led by General Ewell, was instantly surrounded, trapped against the creek. Nearly 8,000 Confederate soldiers, a full quarter of Lee's remaining army, were forced to lay down their arms. 8 Confederate generals were captured. From a nearby ridge, General Lee watched the collapse. "My God," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Has the army been dissolved?" The news reached General Grant that evening. He knew the end was now inevitable. The chase was over. The final act of the script could be written. He picked up his pen and, for the first time, wrote directly to his opponent, General. The result of the last week must convince you of the hopelessness of further resistance. Lee was not ready. His pride and his duty would not let him be. He replied to Grant defiantly, "I do not think the emergency has arisen to call for the surrender." He still had one final move in his script. After a small skirmish at Farmville, he pushed his men west one last time. His new target, the railroad stop at Appomattox Station. A final cache of rations was waiting for him there. But Grant read this final page before it was even written. He saw Lee's desperate gambit, and he prepared his masterstroke. He ordered his cavalry not to follow Lee, but to race him on a shorter, parallel path. On April 8th, General Custer's cavalry rode relentlessly, covering miles in a desperate sprint. Their target was not Lee's army. It was his food. They reached Appomattox Station just hours before Lee's starving vanguard. The trap was sprung. The trains and the last hope of the Confederate army were captured and burned. But Custer did not stop there. All through the night, Union infantry marched, arriving just in time to form a solid, impassable wall of blue. Directly in front of Lee's escape route, Grant, now certain of the outcome, sent another, gentler note to Lee, ignoring the defiance. He offered to meet, not to demand surrender, but to discuss the terms of peace. The morning of April 9th, Lee looked west. He saw only Union cavalry. He believed he had one last fight. He ordered his men to attack, to clear the road. The cavalry engaged, and then, as planned, they parted. and the cavalry parted to reveal a wall of blue. Thousands upon thousands of Union infantry drawn up in perfect battle lines, blocking the road. In that one horrifying moment, they understood. It was not a screen he had to break. It was an army. Grant had not just followed him. He had outrun him. The trap was sprung. A Confederate officer looked at his general. "There is nothing left, General Lee," he said, "but to go and see General Grant." The script was written miles away. Ulysses S. Grant sat under a tree. He was suffering from a pounding migraine, his worst in months. A messenger arrived, carrying Lee's final note, agreeing to meet. Grant read the message, and as he later wrote in his memoirs, the moment he finished, his headache simply vanished. They met in the parlor of a small home in the village. Lee, in his finest uniform, Grant in his mud-splattered field clothes. The final page of the script was written not with anger, but with dignity. Grant's terms were generous. The Confederate soldiers would simply lay down their arms and go home. The war, for them, was over. Lee's surrender at Appomattox did not end the Civil War, but it began the end. A brutal 4-year conflict, concluded not by a final bloody battle, but by a simple, inescapable trap, set by a man who had already read the final page.